Feeling overwhelmed by all the videos, podcasts, and books you consume, yet struggling to remember or apply what you've learned? That used to be me. Then I decided to do something about it. And the system I'm using now, powered by my Tana Supertag called Systematic Synthesis, is seriously amazing me. I can't believe how much I'm remembering now, and most importantly, how I'm actually using what I'm learning now. Don't get me wrong, I love to learn, as evidenced by my ongoing collection of degrees. But I want to apply what I'm learning so I can make meaningful changes in my life and move the goals that are most important to me and my family forward. Want to start actually using more of the information you're consuming? Then keep watching. I go through it in this video. Hi there, my name is Dr. Monica Rishavi. Welcome back to my channel. With my background of over 20 years in education, from K-12 to college and even graduate level, along with my business insights as Chief Operating Officer for an online education company, I share videos on my Systematic YouTube channel designed to empower you. Together, we'll tackle digital challenges and transform into everyday knowledge warriors equipped with practical insights and systematic workflows. Thank you for joining today, and let's get started on conquering digital defeat together. I love to kick off my template training videos by showing you a video training outline, and I like to use the system that the template is in so you can see a little bit more about how you can use the system. Perhaps I'm using Tana in a different way than you normally do, so it's just a nice way for both myself to have everything contained within one template and for you to see what it would be like to use Tana maybe in a different way. So I'm using Command-Shift down on my keyboard just to open up my training outline. And you'll see there's going to be 9 steps to the training that I'm going to walk through for this template. It doesn't really need that many steps, but I like to break things down so it's really simple and easy to understand. So first, let's go through some basics. Important things to know about this template. This template does use AI commands. So if you're not a fan of AI, then I wouldn't suggest using this template. I love using AI, and I think that it's really powerful, and there's some cool and interesting things that you can do with it. The template is not designed to work without AI. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about AI in Tana. So you need to have your AI key in Tana. If you've never done this before, I've linked to AI for Builders, a Tana help guide. I've also added information of this just about the fact that you need to have your open AI key in Tana. And this AI for Builders guide shows you how to do that. So this guide doesn't walk you through that, but I just wanted to get through those steps to let you know you need to be able to use AI and you need to have it set up inside of Tana. Next, let's talk about the fields powering this system. It's important for you to know what super tags are involved. 8 tags that are part of this. The AI generated one technically isn't necessary, and I'll talk through when you see the template why this is here and how it works. But the gist of it is whenever I have information come into Tana, I like to have my tag let me know somehow that this was AI generated. So all of my super tags are extending the AI generated tag. And what that means, and we'll look through this, is just that whenever anything is tagged with brief summary, key points, terms and definitions, or quiz questions, these tags extend the AI generated tag. So I could click on this later and see all of the information I've brought into my system, whether it's a topic, summary, key points, terms and definitions, or quiz questions, just by clicking this one tag. So it's really easy for me to see all my AI-generated content related to this template in my system at once. Let's talk about the template. So a brief overview of the template, we can take a look at all of the fields. I'll just do Command, Shift, and click on the pound key, so I can open up in my side panel what this template looks like and expand my panel a little bit. And the top of the template, you'll see these 4 fields up at the top. These are all AI commands. So you should never be typing in here except for the following reasons. 1, if you want to edit something after it comes back, like AI sends back some nonsense and you want to edit it a little bit. Maybe you want to delete it because whatever came back, you're like, I need to try again. I'm going to modify the prompt. Other than that, these fields are not for you to type in. You won't hurt anything. It's just that these are tags that, again, I mentioned are extending this AI generated super tag. So if you were creating your own novel new content here, you might get confused later on as to whether or not you made that or AI did. So these are all AI powered fields. And I tried to note that in the descriptions too. It's provided by OpenAI, etc. All of the fields down here are fields that you're entering information into. So the idea with this template and walking through how I'm using it for my system is that when I interact with any kind of content that I'm trying to learn from, whether it is a YouTube video, a podcast, an article, website, whatever, usually things that are longer than I would say just one or two paragraphs. There's something that I would call as pretty meaty. There's some content to it. I'm using this Supertag template to help me get a summary, find key points, get terms and definitions, and if it's something that I really want to make sure I know, quiz questions. If you're learning something that is completely new to you, I would encourage you to maybe give this a try. You might think, well, what am I going to do with a quiz question? I'm not in school anymore. Just because you're not in school anymore doesn't mean you can't quiz yourself. I found that I learned many topics a lot more in depth, a lot more clearly when I took the time to actually quiz myself and if I understood the content. Again, you might not use quiz questions, but I suggest you give it a try. My connections and project connections. I've also found through my personal and professional experience that when I am looking at content new to me or reviewing content, if I take the time when I'm reviewing and learning the content to make connections to my life related to the content that I just read, it sticks better. It stays with me longer. So that's why I have this my connection. So after you've gone through the process of having AI do the summary, the key points, terms and definitions, and quiz questions, you would take some notes in this field, note not in the super tag, but actually in the field, where you would be reflecting on how does this information relate to what I'm doing right now, my personal life, my work, what kind of insights came to mind when I was thinking about this or reading this. And similarly, project connections. Now, the project connections field is connected to a project super tag. I've included this in the template, but if you already have your own project super tag, just go ahead and click and remove this. I'll put it back again, but you can just click, press delete, and choose whatever super tag template you want to have connected to it. So you might have your own projects. So you can do that with any of the fields, with the exception of I would recommend the AI fields. Each one of these are connected to super tags that I set up for the system. So for example, brief summary has a brief summary super tag. If I click into the key points, it has a key points super tag. So if you already have projects or you already have quiz questions, you could, in theory, swap those super tags out to be something else. I suggest you leave the project or the quiz questions though, because these quiz questions are AI generated. So unless yours are as well, then I would recommend leaving quiz questions also being connected to your quiz questions super tag that came with this super tag template. Okay. And again, to swap it with something else, you just click, press delete, and then you can pick whichever one you want. I'll just put that one back. So that covers the brief overview of the AI-enabled fields, the connections, and the project connections. Brief talk about the source material, and then when I go through the demo of what I've completed and what I'm going to do from scratch, it'll make more sense, I think, and become more clear. So topics. This is a field you may end up deciding to change to your own super tag. Now, what I mean when I say topics, these are key areas or themes in your life, personal, professional, or otherwise, that this source you think connects to. So for example, I have different topics and themes and areas, super tags inside of my Tana. It's a little bit different than this. I could probably repurpose one of those fields, but I'm using a distinct topics field because I want to be able to clearly identify both for myself and the AI, what's the so what of this? Like I listen to a podcast and this is the podcast I've attached it to, and I want AI to read the transcript and produce a summary, key points, etc. I wanted to know through what lens or through which context am I thinking about this? Maybe, for example, the one you'll hear me talk about has to do with building a personal brand. So the, for example, topic I will probably put there is something like building my personal brand to promote my small business or something along those lines. So might be a longer topic than you normally are used to having. So it's different than just saying, for example, marketing. Because yes, that technically falls under marketing, but the topic or theme that this relates to for me and why I care about the podcast is the fact that I'm learning how to better build my personal brand. So I want to be more descriptive with that topic. There are two source fields. This one source field is required, meaning you have to have information here before you start running the AI commands. This extra source material is optional. Here's why this is here. You'll see in a moment when I get down into model 4 or step 4 that there are different models that you can use with OpenAI inside of Tana. And the smaller models, or the older models, I guess I'll say, they aren't able to bring in as many tokens, which is the AI way of saying how many words they can bring in at a time. So something I learned when I was first starting to use AI is that, especially when using it in Tana, if I would paste like a transcript from a Zoom call, I would get an outline, but I noticed a lot of it was missing content. Like, it didn't have half of the call if the call was like 2 hours. And that's because it wasn't able to pass through the entire transcript. It was too long. So I have set up some of these. I've set up some of these commands so that they have I believe it's 3.5. I have had some of these set up with 4. And I'll explain why I'm doing that when we go through it. But the gist of it is some of the prompts are a little more complicated, and AI performs better with the more intelligent version of 4.0. I'll have to double check my numbers here, but it's 4 point something. The more basic, like give me a summary, works fine with the lower one. There is a preview model that takes like 100,000 tokens, which I do use for longer things like doing a full-on article. If I'm looking at a very long article, or if I'm looking at a long transcript or something like that. That's just because I know it will pass through all of the information, because it's definitely enough tokens. So you might be wondering, well, why don't you just use the big one all the time so you don't run into any issues? Good question. It comes down to 2 things. The more advanced the model, the slower it goes. So I'll show you kind of a comparison with how that works. Also, it's more expensive for the higher models. So I have linked, and we'll talk about that in step 4, to the pricing for OpenAI. I didn't put screenshots of pricing here because today is January 20th, 2024, and likely their pricing will change. So just kind of the 2 things to think about. The more advanced the model is, the more expensive it becomes, marginally, but it does add up. And it takes longer for the answer to come back. So if you're really looking for fast responses and you're okay with it not being quite as advanced with how it's kind of reasoning and looking through your content, then a lower model is probably fine. If you have a long piece of text, though, you're going to need a more advanced model that will take more tokens. So that does it for our overview of the Supertag. And I'm going to close my first 2 steps. Actually, I'll leave this one open to show you the demo of what I made so far. So, how to make a killer thumbnail to blow up your channel. This is a video I watched recently that was on YouTube. And I'm just going to scroll up to the top because you'll see all the information here. And inside of this, and note, I could zoom in just on the node to focus on that. I added my Supertag, Systematic Synthesis, to it. And that produced these fields. And at the time, everything from here on up was empty. And then I used the AI command buttons to generate the content for here. So I'm going to go ahead and take them out so you can see what it would look like to fill it in again. Actually, I'll leave it here for a moment just to talk you through it, and then I'll delete it. So there's a summary that came back, some key points. Note that each line, each node has the tag. There are, of course, terms and definitions. For the most part, I have not seen, when I've used this, the AI to repeat terms and definitions. You will, however, notice over time, you will have repeats across other sources. So what I recommend doing is just every so often going to your terms and definitions Supertag. By clicking on it like I did, you'll see all of them here. You can sort them by the name, and then just do a spot check to see if you have any that are duplicative. There are advanced ways that I have not explored yet where you are able to use AI to remove the duplicates. But what I end up doing is, if these were duplicated, I would select the 2 and I would do Command K, merge node. And then you can choose, do I want the first one into the second one or the second one into the first one? I prefer to do that because then I'm making the choice about which definition to keep. Quiz questions. When you expand the node, you'll see the answer is below the question. And again, I think this is kind of cool, even if you're not in an academic class where testing is required, because, for example, a lot of these things I wasn't familiar with when I watched this video. What is a curiosity gap? But the gap between what the viewers know and what they want to know. And so it's really nice to kind of just help reminding me and kind of quiz my knowledge on this. And then again, this part at the bottom is where I'd fill in my information. So as an example, I might put in that I was looking at trying to create better thumbnails for my small business. So I'm trying to create more engaging thumbnails for my small business to see if that impacts click rates on my videos. So I want to see if that impacts who clicks or how many people click my videos. And then project connections. So for example, this might be a project I'm working on to just create one video a week. So I have projects right now like create one video per week in 2024. Since I don't have that video already, I'm making a new one. And down at the bottom here, you'll just see where I put in my source material. And again, I put this at the bottom, even though it's required first, because that way you don't constantly have to scroll past the really long transcript every time you work with it. Yes, you could hide the fields, but I prefer to know it's here for sure because I don't want to click the command buttons to run it until the information is here. So I pasted in this whole transcript here. I did find that even though it's kind of long, it worked okay. My general rule of thumb has been if I kind of get around the 45, 60-minute mark for a video, then I start to use a different model. If it had been too long, I could have put the whole thing here and I could have pasted like half of it at a time or a quarter of it at a time. So that's just my way of giving you another option. If you have a really long thing and you don't want to use the more advanced model, you can keep it on the lower model. And what you could do, so I'm just going to, I won't be able to cut all this at a time. If you select too many nodes at once, it starts to unselect itself just like that. So if I take that, for example, and paste it down here, I'm just moving it down. And so if I was filling in, for example, the paragraph summary. Now, I don't think a summary works really well if you do it in chunks because a summary ideally is going to look at the whole thing, but let's say maybe key points. If I swap out the information, if I take something that was here and I put information from my extra source material that's down here, and then I run this again, and the key points is associated with the key here, it's not going to overwrite this. It'll just add more. So that's kind of why I put in this extra source material so it works nicely. You could put in like a quarter of it or half of it and then keep hitting the run button on your key. I would do one of these at a time if you're doing that. However, keep in mind, when the AI looks at it, it's looking at the material that you've given it. So if you're like, what are the key points of this lesson? And it will know the name of it and it will know the content you gave it inside of the source box. So you may find some things duplicate because maybe something is said more than once in a transcript. I think this probably would work better in an article or a blog post that didn't have so much repetition. I find YouTube videos, for example, tend to repeat things quite a bit. And then finally, we have at the very bottom topics as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the point of this is not to say, for example, for the title of this video, how to make a killer thumbnail to blow up your channel. That could be just like marketing. But I'm looking for a more specific topic about why this matters to me or what this is related to in my life. So like growing a small business with YouTube and building a personal brand, those are two things that relate to me. So when I used those topics in conjunction with the prompt to do a summary, it gave me examples like this. You know, you could, for example, pay attention to these things. These strategies can be applied to growing a small business with YouTube. Now, it didn't tell me too much about that. And I think part of that is because this uses the GPT-3, etc. model. So let's take a quick look at what the prompts look like and how to modify those prompts and how to change what the model is and what we might get back if I change this one back. So I'm going to do Command-Shift-Click on the brief summary. And in order to get to the prompt, all you have to do is scroll to the bottom and go to Advanced. And you'll see them, actually, apologize, went into the wrong button. So all of the prompts are at the top level, not at the tag level, they're at the top level. So Command-Shift-Click on your super tag for Systematic Synthesis. And then you scroll to the bottom of this one and go to Advanced. And you'll see all the little icons. I've matched the icons with what's in the field. So the book is the brief summary, the key is the key points, the tag is terms and definitions, and the apple is quiz questions. So if I'm looking first at the brief summary, I just click on the arrow to expand it. And you can look at this in either edit configuration or prompt workbench. I find edit configuration is just a little bit easier than having to open up another panel. What this is doing, I have the temperature set just above 0, and you'll see there's a definition. The higher you go on the number between 0 and 2, the more creative it gets. So when it gets more creative, it can be more inaccurate. If you have it too serious, it's not going to really try to give you, I think, innovative or novel ideas. So I just set this low for now, but you can adjust it and however you'd like to do it. I put this node here because when you go into the prompt workbench, and that node is this one. If you go into prompt workbench, when you are working with AI, you can scroll to the bottom and you can test how the AI would respond. So I highly suggest if you think you're going to change the prompt up at the top and you're going to adjust what things say here, before you start running it here, test it to see how it works. So I'm going to show you kind of both at once because you can see this prompt is what's here. So you can edit it in either location. So here are some things to know about the prompt. So this topics field is referencing what you put in the topics at the bottom. So at the very bottom, actually right above the transcript, it is referencing the topics that I put here. And you'll see in the test that it says that. So I've recently engaged with some content that aligns with my personal interest areas. That is pulled directly from those topics. And then it goes on because I have a prompt that's similar to the one I'm using because I want to tell it that I want it to focus on helping me learn things more efficiently and more systematically. And in this case, I'm asking it to make me a summary of 5 to 7 sentences. I tell it some things about, don't do these things because, and you will find sometimes despite telling AI not to do something, it will do it anyway. So sometimes you'll get a header, even though you don't need a header, which I would suggest just delete the header. Don't run it again because it's going to cost money to run it again. So I would suggest just delete it. Content title is the name of the node. So when you are making a new node, sometimes people call it pages, but they're nodes in Tana. So if you made a new article, whatever, I suggest you call it the title of whatever the thing is because it'll know you're going to give it what it is. Because if you look here, it says that the title is how to make a killer thumbnail to blow up your channel. It's pulling it from there. The content for review is something called sys context. And what that means is anything inside this node. There's different ways to do this, but that I have found to be the most efficient way to do that. So it'll suck in all the information and it will be able to work with it. I've also told it to disregard other things like key points, definitions, etc., because it will see that there are key points and so forth. And I don't want it to return that in this summary. So that's why I tell it to disregard it. Now, right now, this template is using, you have to scroll all the way to the bottom, just the basic 3.5 turbo. And that is the summary that I got when I used 3.5 turbo. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to run this again, but I'm going to change it to GPT-4. Now, I'm not going to test it because I'm okay spending the couple cents for this. And I'm going to click this again. So let's see what kind of summary we get when I use GPT-4. I have found that GPT-4 is not super slow. Some of the others are much slower, but it's a little bit slower than the other one. Notice this is much more clear, actually much more in detail. So it's just kind of skimming this. So here, for a small business owner or personal brand builder, there's definitely a little bit more information here. This is a dance, a balance of adjusting the prompt, like what you're asking it to bring back to you, and what version of ChatGPT you're running, whether you're using, just the standard one, or you are using 4.5, the standard of 3.5, or you're using the kind of upgraded of GPT-4. So there's also another way to adjust this. I'm going to close the prompt workbench and move this panel over just a little bit. When I enable GPT-4 in the prompt workbench, I now have it here. And if you click and delete this, you can see there are all these different versions of this. Back on the main page of where my outline is for this video, I link to the page in OpenAI where you can see the pricing, but it also describes what these different ones are. I use GPT-4 1106 preview when I'm running really long information like transcripts and articles. But the rest of the time, I am just using the 3.5 turbo that is their default one. But you will not see model to use unless you go into the workbench and you enable it. Because if I go to prompt workbench and I change it at the bottom, so instead of like right now, I'm going to toggle it on and toggle it off again. And then if I go down here, notice there is no GPT model. But if I click this, it comes back on. So if you're like, I can't figure out how to change it, we'll go into the workbench, turn GPT-4 on, click here, take this out, and you can adjust it there. And then if later you decide you just want to go back to the regular one, go back into the workbench, and then scroll to the bottom. Actually, I double open that there. Scroll to the bottom and just make sure that this is off. So you'll be on the regular version. I always suggest trying like the cheapest, the 3.5 turbo first, just to see if it's something you like. Now, you can adjust the prompts the same way for every single one of these. So we were just looking at the bottom, again, of the Systematic Synthesis Supertag template, and I showed you how we have these commands. So if I close the configuration, I can collapse it. I have the remaining three, so key points, terms and definitions, and the apple. If you find you want to make more Supertag commands, you can certainly do that. Have fun. What I would suggest you do is do Command K and choose duplicate, change your emoji, and just update it. So at the bottom where I now have 2 apples, I could go and, for example, put this whatever I would like. So I'll just put a smiley for now. And then I could expand this, edit the configuration, or go into the prompt workbench, change the prompt, and so forth. The important thing to know, though, is you need to change the target node. The target node is where OpenAI sends the answer. So in the Apple one, the quiz questions, it's sending the information here. So if I wanted a smiley face one, I'd have to create another field. I'd ideally call it smiley face or whatever, so it matches. And then I would copy that, Command C, and paste that here because you want to make sure that it matches. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. But that's just a quick overview. Again, you can go into any of these fields and adjust the prompts. You can play around with what version of the model it's running. But those are kind of the basic adjustments that you would make for this particular Supertag. So let's look at going back to the video outline. We've gone through my demo of the how to make a killer thumbnail to blow up your channel video, so you can see how that works. If we look at modifying the AI prompts, we just walked through that. Deciding which OpenAI model to use. So as of today, January 20th, 2024, I just took a screenshot and put in what models are available. Likely there will be more models in the future, but that is what is there now. Thinking about, again, which model to use, I mentioned that this has to do with pricing. So check out the website for OpenAI and just decide what you'd like to do. One of the things that made me feel a lot more comfortable in using this was the fact that you can put a cap on how much can be spent. So you do put a credit card on it. And for example, I have a $25 cap per month that I put on mine. And I can go in and adjust it if I'd like to. But I didn't want to have like runaway charges with this. One of the big benefits I see to using AI inside of Tana like this, as opposed to just going through like the OpenAI ChatGPT website, is that I never get the message that I've hit my cap. And I do pay for ChatGPT Premium, but I do sometimes hit my cap of however many conversations I can have in so many hours. You don't get a cap when you use API, so you can use it all day long. You will be charged for it, but you can use it as much as you'd like. So we've gone through those steps. Let's take a look at one more demonstration, and I noticed my numbers are off, so let me go ahead and change those really quick so that they match properly. And I'll just do each one as we go along. So demonstration using a podcast transcript. So this is a podcast I actually listened to this morning, Brand Builders Podcast. It was Building Your Personal Brand Journey with Elizabeth Stevens, and very similar to what I just did. I typed this in, I added the super tag to it, and then what I did was I pasted in the whole transcript. And I thought this would be a good example to show you how long it takes to use the more advanced model, because I do find it's much better, but if you look, this is really long. It was an hour. And I might be able to use some of the other models, but I'm thinking that the more advanced one would be better here. Now, first, just so we can see the difference, I'm going to run it with the basic turbo. Now, because I was demonstrating, I want to make sure that I left it on the right model. And you might want to leave some notes to yourself so you know and you don't run it on the expensive one and don't realize it. If I go into my edit configuration and scroll down, I can see that there's no mention of what speed it is. So that's how I know that it's just the default 3.5. So I'm going to go ahead and run this the first time. And we'll see, I didn't put my topics in. See, it'll prompt you if you forgot your topics. So I have to scroll down to the bottom. And I purposely left it that way. I could have made them optional, but I wanted you to include the topics because I find it works much, much better with that. So this episode was how to build your personal brand. And if I take a look, I believe I have some themes in here already. So I had my building a personal brand. Trying to think if there was anything else in here. Oh, it would also talked a bit about the customer journey and the different types of customer journeys. So um, developing personas for customers and how that impacts customer journeys. I'm gonna add that as a new topic. Now, if I go back up the top and I click, you'll notice that this time it's running. I know it's running because the little book kind of flashed. And this one came back pretty fast. I actually don't see a point of running this on the more advanced simply because it's just a paragraph. So we'll leave it on that one. I'll go ahead and get some key points for this. And again, I always like to check, just unless I'm in like one session where I'm doing this a lot. I want to look at inside of my super tag, what model do I have this on? So I can edit the configuration and scroll it down. It doesn't mention it, so it's at the default. So let's go ahead and run it. I click the key and you'll see it going. Cool. So I get some key points here. Again, I think it's possible it might be better, but I'm going to wait until I'll run it on this one. It'll be more interesting. So now what I'm going to do, just because I want to be able to clearly see the difference, is I'm just going to put in some stars and then go to the next line. And I'm going to go into, this is the key points, I believe. Yes. So I'm going to go into the workbench and I'm going to scroll down and I'm just going to do GPT-4. We'll see if I get any kind of major difference with that. And then I'm going to hit the key again because we're going to run it one more time. And what's supposed to happen is it'll put it below the stars. We'll see if I'm surprised. It doesn't. And actually, it's following my directions now. And I'll show you the prompt in just a second. So these prompts seem pretty similar. And actually, I'm noticing it's cutting it off. It's not going as long into the content as I think it could. So I am going to run it again after all. So you can see if I run it on the more advanced one. But I want to show you when I mentioned it's following my directions. Here's what I mean. If I look in the prompt, I told it, don't number the key points. The base one, 3.5 turbo, it numbers it. The more intelligent one for the turbo 4, it does not number it. Let's see what it does if I change this to the more advanced model that I use, the preview, that can take in more content. And then I'll keep going to the next one because it's going to take a little while for it to do that. So I'm going to run that and then go on. You can run them all at once if you'd like, by the way. You can go and click, 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 and it'll keep on going. Terms and definitions. So I'm going to close out that one. And let's take a look at running that one first again. And apologies, I'm still getting used to some of the clicking. So you'll notice that I keep opening up that field, but I don't need to. I just need to keep the Synthesis Supertag open. And I'll look at the next one. So terms and edit configuration. Again, it's not, this is mentioning GPT-4. So I neglected to take this one off of it. So I'm going to go into this one, go into the prompt workbench, and I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom and take GPT-4 off. Now, as I did that, this is just making sure that when someone uses the template, everything's going to be at the slower, cheaper option to begin with. So notice it looks like it has finished, I believe. Actually, I don't think I see it yet. We have 1, 2, 3. Sometimes you'll find it just kind of doesn't come. So I'll go ahead and hit it again. We'll see that it just might have stopped working for some reason. And terms and definitions, I can run that at the same time. So I'm going to click my terms and definitions and you'll see it's going. And this one I don't see going. Now it is working for me. I'm not exactly sure why it's not on this one, but what I'm going to do is just going to go back into the key and set this one back at the prompt that is the standard. So that way when someone gets the template, it is still working. It is possible that I have capped out my $25. I'll have to check after this video and see what's going on with it. But what I'm just going to do again is from advanced, I'm going to go into the prompt workbench, scroll all the way to the bottom and make sure that I've toggled it so GPT-4 is off. Again, this is for the one that is related to the key. So it's my key points. And if I look down, yep, it doesn't mention the more expensive one. So those are just some different options. I'm ultimately going to leave this just with one, so there's not a series of them. Sometimes GPT you'll see it does some additional source tagging in here. It's not necessary, so you can take it off if you can keep it if you want, but I'm not using that. Now, notice with the terms and definitions, it did go ahead and put it underneath of a header. It also returned the name of the title. Sometimes GPT does that. So you can just go ahead and delete it if you don't need it. I would select these and do Shift Tab. And then that way you don't have them nested underneath terms and definitions because I don't think it's necessary. Note, I don't want though my terms to be enumerated. So what I am going to do here, and again, I will put it back to the way it is when you get the template, just because I don't want you to be surprised with which model it's on. But I am going to change the model and see if that makes a difference. Earlier, it did. I can find that sometimes it does make a difference, sometimes it doesn't, because you see, I'm telling it important rules you must adhere to. And it can read things in nested notes. And you can notice that it tells you all of them. So you can see exactly what it gets in this preview. But I'm going to scroll down and let's just try the 4 model first before I do anything crazy with a more advanced one, since that wasn't working earlier. And what I'm going to do is delete the ones that I got because I definitely don't want them with numbers and I don't want to take the time to delete them manually. So I'm going to click my little terms and definitions and see if that comes back. While it's doing that, I'm going to try the quiz questions too. And quiz questions is set at that GPT-3 turbo model. So it's just the standard one. Okay, yeah. When I use the GPT Turbo 4, it doesn't have numbers. So you see, as it gets quote unquote more intelligent, it follows your directions better. It's worth it to me to spend slightly, we're talking like 0.00 whatever cents, it's not even a cent, to have it be more intelligent. But that's totally up to you. And then quiz questions. So we have some quiz questions. I find when it's not an academic thing that the quiz questions that are produced here, the 3-point model is fine for me. If you really wanted to make sure it was super detailed, again, you would just increase which model you're using. So those look good. At least we didn't get numbers back here with this one. And again, I'm going to go into the prompt workbench for the Supertag of the key and just scroll to the bottom and just turn off the GPT-4 to make sure I don't have that here. So what I suggest you do when you first get started with the template is just kind of look through the prompts, adjust them because you may see that this isn't exactly what I want. I have tried to make it, generic enough that someone could just go ahead and hit play, so to speak, on the buttons so they would work. But at the same time, everyone's unique. What your learning goals are and your journey is going to be different. So I suggest you change it so that it'll suit your needs the best. If I go back to our video outline, just to make sure we're covering all the bases here, we've talked about the podcast transcript. We just did that. Let's look at making real life connections. I've mentioned that briefly, but this is worth saying again. So this field that you can see here, I do have it set as required. You can see this little yellow alert. If you don't type it there, nothing happens. I didn't put project connections as required simply because I could see someone not necessarily needing project connections right away. However, I think it would be nice to always do those personal connections for yourself because you're probably not going to do it later if you don't do it now. That's something I have found with personal experience. So just do my numbers, but let's look. The how to make real life connections, talked through that. How to connect this resource to your projects. Just again, you pick in the field projects that you have. And how to install the template. So in terms of installing the template, I've provided a number of things here. The way this works is that if you click the Get the Systematic Synthesis Tana Template, you will be directed to a website, which is in full transparency, and opt into my email newsletter called Systematic News. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you get the template, and after reading a newsletter, you decide it's not for me, no harm, no foul, unsubscribe. Please do. I don't want you to have things in your inbox that you don't like. But I wanted to clearly explain to you how it works in terms of getting the template. So once you have received that Tana template in the sense that you've been redirected to the page where you can install the template, I wanted to make sure I provided step-by-step directions about it because the first time I installed a template with Tana, I was a little bit concerned, especially because when you do an AI template, you see this big warning about how this template contains commands and it can create, edit, and delete your data. So I wanted to be super clear here. Dr. Monica Reshavi, have no access to your system. I cannot create, edit, or delete your data, to be clear. However, if you choose to modify any of these fields, You're running AI commands. You choose to modify it to say, like, return this information, then delete content over here. That's on you. You can restore information by going to Command K open trash. That being said, anytime you're using AI, you just want to be careful and make sure you're mindful of what you're doing. If you're not sure, ask. Comment on this video, send me a message. I have lots of different ways you can reach out to me. So if you've decided you're okay with that and you're going to go ahead and install the template, once you click that you agree and you're going to install the template, you'll have an option to add it to your home of whatever destination workspace you want. A lot of people only have one workspace. If you have more than one, click the little caret next to the first workspace and you'll see your list and you can pick which one you want to add it to. And then when you first install the template, you will see it looks something like this. So I have a screenshot that I put here. The reason I include this little video below is I don't want it to throw you that it looks like there's only 3 nodes when I've been using so many more. That's just because I have them all expanded. And if you click this little YouTube video, you will see a quick demo. There's no sound. It's just showing you how you can click and expand each of the nodes so you know all of the content is there. And finally, as a reminder, if you want to get the free Tana template, just go over to my Systematic Synthesis Tana Template sign up page and go ahead and click that. To wrap up this video, I just want to point out all of the super tags that are used with the fields in this system are all located here. Feel free, once you've installed it inside of your system, to move these to your library. And the way that you do that is you can select all of them. Note, the website one came in automatically when I pasted in a website URL that's just part of one of Tana's features. If you don't want website, just delete it. It's not necessary to make the system work.